Hi guys, thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
I think your mic might be off.
Oh, yeah. Yep, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
it really was a pleasure to do, and it really was. It's such a rich platform, and it's cool that if you guys haven't looked at it in a while, it's great to go back through it, dig through the stuff. I guess the first thing that I wanted to ask you guys, and I wanted just to give you guys a little bit more context, there's going to be a series of lectures that happen. There's a poster over there by the wall text that you can look at to see when they are. The lectures are actually prompted by one of the assignments that Harrell and Miranda put out into the world called Start a Lecture Series. When we were asked to curate the exhibition, they took us in and they showed us what the collection held, like what the actual archive was. And I was really struck by the fact that while it wasn't just a hard drive, that there's a huge amount of physical stuff in that collection. And so some of my questions are around, I just am wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about, one, what it was like to deal with all of that stuff as it was coming in. And I imagine that before the museum had it, that it existed in your lives to some degree. It was, you had to store it.
Well, Yuri had to store it.
Oh, you had Yuri storing it.
So there is a third. Where did Yuri move? Okay,
there,
yeah,
yeah.
that was confusing. Yeah, so our third collaborator is over there, Yuri Ono, and it was her address. Yeah. Yeah. So Yuri, this was one of the the idea that you would upload something was totally boggling. I think a lot of people are just like, whatever, I'll just mail it to you.
Right. So there were cassette tapes, VHS tapes, hard copy photos. All of that Yuri had to digitize.
And then
one by one.
Objects. Do you want to come up or no? Should we just bumble through this? She's like, no, you guys. But wait, how do we have all the objects? Is that because we asked? People sent them in?
If it was from an exhibition, then we'd try to give them back, and some of them we kept. Okay. We couldn't get them back to people. So there's not that many objects like the Rubik's Cube. I think there's one show, there was some stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
So there were a lot of exhibitions that happened along the way, also before SF MoMA acquired the piece. And so there were framed photos and objects and things like that happened. But as far as the ephemera from the digitizing process, Yuri had a huge mini boxes of stuff that had just accumulated, because at the time that we started it, you couldn't just send in a digital photo necessarily.
Right. When you were making the decision about what remained in and what remained out, was there a moment where you were trying to decide what went into the archive? It just was everything?
No, everything there was.
Yeah.
Also, the original idea of how would shows be curated, because we felt like there could be shows. I think the idea was really just anyone can curate a show, and that you don't need to have special access to the site, because of course you could just make all the work. You could have your class make all the work in the show using the assignments, which happened.
Yeah, there was an interesting example of Steve Lambert, who many people know his work now. He was a high school teacher somewhere down south in the peninsula, and he did a show with his high school students and had the show at City Hall in display cases, and they made all of the work for it.
Right, so it was a really loose sense, and we never got that work, but it was an official show, and it went up on the website, and so...
I think we even made posters for those shows. Sometimes.
Yeah, we got a little,
Yuri would.
You can do it, we want to establish
help out.
the look.
We would Yuri would design a poster and send it to them, yeah.
Which is a funny thing about the website, because it was, on one hand, it was this incredibly open platform, but then it was also highly structured by you guys in regards to even how the assignments were meant to be seen at the end, what they were to look like.
I think a lot about that, because I realize, that was one of my first experiences with directing in through a conduit, sort of, and figuring out how precise do the directions need to be to get exactly what you want. I've since done that many times, sometimes live and performance, and we would really, we'd be so excited at an assignment and put up the directions, and then the first one would come in and we go, what? Like, did you read? And then we'd be like, oh, okay.
Let's rewrite it.
We need to specify this,
Yeah.
and this. And then we'd keep fixing it until the sort of essence of the piece
I think there was
came out.
maybe 1 or 2 assignments that just totally went awry, and we got rid of them.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Edited them, removed them.
Like it was just like, this is not at all what we were
work.
thinking.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were a lot of like funny things like that happened along the way.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can see it in the archive. You can see that there's like just a range of different stuff in there that seems. I was really surprised by not only just the objects like the Rubik's Cube, and there's like a giant onesie. Like an
that was from the
onesie.
very first show. Yeah,
and that was in Maine, right?
Yeah, so the very first show was the first 5 assignments, and that was for a show at the ICA in Portland, Maine, that they had commissioned us to make a web-based project. So we made Learning to Love You More for that show. Yeah. And when people submitted, they submitted both online to the website, and they physically sent the thing they made, which there was an audio piece, a video piece, photograph, I think, and this clothing, and they were like then displayed at that museum.
Is for you guys is at this point because there's been several different exhibitions of the work. Is for you guys the work still the website primarily? Is that like the project, or is it the archive?
I don't think it ever. I mean, like I think our interest in the website was to get people to leave the website and go do something.
Right.
And so even then, it wasn't so much about the website. That was just sort of like the activation point and the archive. Yeah. But really, it was about the kinds of experiences and interactions that we were hopefully encouraging people to have that were out in the world. And then I think we just saw the whole thing as the project, you know.
Do you guys still hear from people who have been motivated through this? I know that there was a website that was devoted to maybe submissions that didn't make it in. Is there still stuff out there that's happening that you come across?
Okay, number of things. One, adding on to the thing that you were just saying about that it was the experiences and the work itself, because we were actually skeptical of the web. This was also the first of many projects where it's like you end up being like maybe the first person to use technology in a certain way, or one of the first people, but it's out of a kind of critiquing, but you end up becoming pretty engaged in the technology. But yeah, we were like, we're spending all our time online, which we weren't. There was a lot more time we could be spending online now. When you said assignments that didn't make it in, of course, everything made it in, anything submitted, but I think you mean things that were too late, because now you can't submit to the project anymore, so people started their own websites. Right.
Yuri's raising your hand. Yeah. And I think there is a slight, there were some things that didn't make it in, because they just didn't follow the directions at all. And there was this guy up in Portland who was like intentionally not following the directions and trying to see if he could get the work in. And so then he created his own blog that was like rejections from Learning to Love You More, or whatever. And then there's been a million blogs since then where people just do the assignments on their own and that kind of thing.
I mean, I've used them as assignments in classes as well. I'm sure people still use them as teaching tools, I'm sure.
Yeah, I hear about that a lot still. Was there more on that list?
No, I just want to suggest that guy might have used the word trickster to apply to himself.
Right. No, he definitely thought of himself that way. Yeah.
Interesting.
But we were interested in seeing what happened when people followed directions, which I know at the time, like we didn't want to even use the word art because we knew that artists would be really offended by this. Yeah. But that we were thinking of it more the way like a recipe book or a yoga class, and we've used those analogies. But that how even when you're following directions, you wind up with something different. Right. And that the thing that was interesting, I think the thing that's still interesting when you go through the archive on the website, is to compare different variations on how people approach the same set of instructions when they're not trying to be different. They just are different.
Right, right. And some of them, like you were saying, Miranda, as far as honing the assignment so that it has specific results, some of them, like the take a photograph under your bed assignment. there's a kind of consistency to that thing. So there's less room to move around in, but then some of them are like,
Literally, yeah.
yeah, literally less, yeah. Especially for those cats with like bones around their neck.
So many animals appeared under the bed.
Yeah, really bizarre. I looked at every single one of those pictures, and
Dogs, cats, rabbits.
yeah. There was someone has like a crossbow under their bed. There's all kinds of really interesting,
Lots
revealing
of interesting dust formations.
Yeah, lots of dust and flashes on cameras. Yeah,
But we specifically said take a photograph with the flash to get that in there.
How when you guys were making this, how much of it grew directly out of your own practice, the assignments? I mean, I know just from looking at the work, I can see some of it, but it's maybe not easy to parse out.
Yeah, I feel like I need to look at the list, and I would be able to say, oh, right, at this time, I was thinking about. Yeah, I think. Gosh, I'm trying to.
I mean, some of the things were things that we had done already in one way or another. And we thought, like, that worked out well for us, or within a limited space of, like, an audience. Because sometimes Miranda would do stuff where she was doing a screening, and then she would have the audience make a little film, like during the intermission, and then screen that. And so we were using things like that. I had done some assignments with classes or with individuals. And so we were building on some of those things, and some of them were things that we'd just done, and then we just like turned it into an assignment. Some of them were things that we thought were a nice idea that we didn't want to do ourselves, but we wanted to see somebody else do, or we just wanted to see the archive form.
Or it's once you have access to all these people, you can essentially learn something. Like so, I would say sometimes it connected to like the stuff we were actually making, but almost always it connected to things we were feeling and thinking about. So like I went home for Christmas or something, and when you walk into the house you grew up in, and you suddenly see things you never saw growing up, like, oh, these things on the wall, this is art. And like now I'm into art. Like that's my whole thing. And this is art, I guess, that you grew up with. Yeah. And so so out of that came the assignment, make an exhibition of the art in your parents' house. And so people just photographed all the pieces of art. And in some cases it's like, figurines, lots of figurines, or just posters, or religious art, or, and you realize they are all art. They're not art,
And they had an impact on
the
person growing up in that place, whether they knew it or not. And similarly to that one, too, the one that wound up on the cover of the book was to have your parents kiss. And it's also, you go home and you realize, like, gosh, these people don't have any affection. It's weird. Like, what if I, used this assignment to force them to?
Right.
And so in some ways, there were, like, these kind of intervention aspects where we were, like, trying to get people to do things they wouldn't normally do, but we thought would be good for them.
Yeah.
Plus, we also wanted to. It was like one of those things. Like maybe now you could Google parents kissing or something, and you'd actually come up with something. But at the time, it wasn't an archive that existed that we could find anywhere. And we thought, wouldn't this be a nice archive, to have access to? That we just wanted to see it.
Yeah.
And so you put it up, and then within a few days, we'd have like dozens. And I remember the first 5, I think at some point we checked, we had like 50 people who had contributed, and we were both amazed that people did it at all. So then starting to realize, like, whoa, we can do this. We just put something out there, and parents will be kissing each other.
And then like 8,000 people will be participating.
Yeah, around the world. It was very exciting.
Yeah. Harrell, do your parents have art in their house?
Oh yeah, they definitely did, and I have some of it in my house now. I relocated it. Yeah, and it was really significant. I mean, I would like totally trip out on it when I was a kid.
Yeah, You guys want to keep talking about learning to love you more? I actually have some questions sort of along those lines. I'm sure we'll circle back to learning to love you more, but one of the things I wanted to ask you guys was just about your relationship to things in general, because that's part of the lecture series revolves around talking about things. And thinking about the art in your mom's house, Miranda, made me think about how I just recently got rid of storage at my mom's house, and then thinking about like the things that your parents hold on to you and what kind of thing that is. Do your parents still have storage of yours?
Of mine, not of mine, but but my dad always kept a really deep personal archive growing up, as if he was like very famous.
Of his own stuff,
Yeah.
clippings and such.
And yeah. And so I did that, but, starting as a child. So now I have this archive.
Miranda's dad is kind of famous. He's like a writer and publisher. And
Well, but I mean,
it wasn't like totally like a wildly crazy thing to do.
Yeah, but he started it long before.
Okay,
And he's also...
He's an interesting guy.
Yeah. Shout out to Richard. Okay.
Thanks, Richard.
Anyways, so I grew up with this sense of like, well, everyone has an archive, Like, yeah, I mean, how will they refer back to what will the biographers do? So, yeah, I now have a really, also like typing letters on with a carbon copy because they'll want both sides of,
Oh, really? Yeah.
The historian.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the historians. Yeah.
What's your archive like, Harrell?
I've got like boxes and filing cabinets and things like that.
Yeah.
Over the years, it's become less important to me, though. I've
Backed off on it.
just in general, I think objects in general are less important to
Not
me.
me.
Not you. They're becoming more important.
Yeah.
And just speaking of Miranda's dad, and I'm interested in him, but one of the things that I thought was really interesting about Miranda's parents, I don't know, should I be talking about your parents? Because I think in some ways it kind of led to Learning to Love You More in a way, and Miranda's practices. They have a publishing company. They still have a publishing company, but the thing that when I met them, I was so fascinated by was that if Richard in particular was interested in something, which could just be like a restaurant he went to, or his favorite baseball player from when he was a teenager, he would approach them and offer to do a book about them or with them. And they'd be like, "Oh, sure," like you had this thing to offer them that they could have a book, and then through that he would get to spend time with that person or learning about that person or place or whatever.
Right.
And it just seemed like what an interesting agency to have, to be able to approach somebody with something that you could exchange with them that they would want, that allowed you to then have a relationship to them. And I think in some ways, Learning to Love You More is kind of based off of this like similar kind of reciprocal relationship. We have something we're interested in, you have something you're interested in, and we can like combine those things together and create something.
Right, through this tool,
through a device. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, we are sort of publishing in a way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Was that the first endeavor for you guys that would be considered publishing, sort of?
Oh, no.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
We do a lot of stuff
did,
We both
yeah.
did tons of Xerox magazines and small press.
Oh, right, and Joni for Jackie, lots of things.
Yeah. But I think we did think of the web as the website as like a book that could be edited and added to.
Right.
That was sort of.
Because what else would it be?
Right. We weren't thinking like from a technology point of view of like it being code or something.
Right.
It was like we were just thinking like, oh, this can function like a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know we're just going off, and you're like my questions, but one last thing on that.
No, it's
give
better
people
that
a
way.
mic.
It's really better that way.
There is this art, since you mentioned Joni for Jackie, which is a project I did before this project, and when I was like 20, and that is going to the Getty archive right now. So I'm actually going through that whole archive and looking through all this old stuff. And at one point, as part of my archiving, I thought it was important to keep what I called a business diary, just a diary of how I was doing everything. And I'm trying to get someone to help me make a website for this project, Joni for Jackie, and which is a women's film distribution kind of project. And I wrote, today I'm going to go to the library to look at some websites on their computers because I actually haven't seen one.
Wow. Amazing note.
And I was like, whoa, wait. Reading that, like, I just haven't seen one yet. Yeah.
Wow.
But that didn't stop me from wanting to make one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, my first encounter with the web was I was an artist in residence at Claremont Middle School in Oakland, California, after graduate school. And I'd still never seen a website before, and I saw it on their like school computer that they got. You know,
Do you remember
we're
the
from
website?
the past, and this,
What are we doing?
We're kind of all from the past.
we're
It's
like
pretty,
cusp people for sure.
yeah, yeah,
These were very unfamiliar things that we were
Right.
dealing with. You know,
Yeah.
so it's hard to get that perspective now.
yeah. It definitely is. You guys, one thing I'm curious about is just as far as scratch that. I'm just curious if you guys have questions for each other about the project. If there's anything lingering from having worked. I know that you work really closely on a project like this, and at a certain point, it gets more formal. Different relationships happen to the project along the way. I'm curious just if you guys have questions for one another about the working process.
Yeah, I guess I have a question
Really?
for you.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think you are such a sort of auteur in the traditional sort of film sense, but even beyond that, writing books and doing performances and making art exhibits and things like that. And I'm just sort of wondering how Learning to Love You More fits within that larger body of work for you, because it, in some ways, by its nature, is sort of opposite of auteur. It's like, in a way, it can fit within that, but it's like part of a new thing in which there's collaboration between you and me, and then with Yuri, and then all of these thousands of people, and now with Will and Jonn. It's got all of these things. And I know that, like, working in film, you have to work with lots of people, but sort of a different kind of relationship. So I'm just wondering how you feel about it and how it fits into the
Right. Yeah. Every other interview, I feel like someone will say, like, so collaboration, like you're a big collaborator. Tell me about that. And I'll say, no, I've only ever done one project that was a collaboration. Everything else has been, if I'm going to be fair to, my vision that I got to work with really talented people to fulfill that vision. And it felt totally different to do it, with other very established artists who I admired, who had, like totally equal. And yeah, it's a big reference point for me. I mean, when I think I might start on a collaboration, I always stop and go, and go like, okay, let's get real. Like, this is not the dreamy thing you first think it is, when you like brainstorm with someone. This is because, I mean, we did it for years and years, and there were times where we
ups and
weren't.
downs.
Yeah, okay, you're like cutting that short. Well, yeah, and I actually learned so much. I remember thinking really clearly, maybe I even said this to you, like, so often an idea that you would present, my gut reaction would be like, that is so terrible. Like, that is just like the worst idea I've ever heard of. And if I could just like chill for a second, and like let you go through your process and relax and stuff, often it would become like my favorite idea. And that was a totally new thing for me. I mean, I was, operating from like a terrified position of judgment, basically. And so that was so important. I mean, ultimately, if you are going to work with a lot of people and just engage in reality with the world in any way, that's a good skill to have. Yeah. Yes. So.
Are there tools that you learned from Learning to Love You More? Maybe not, you're not collaborating. Well, I guess you have that filter that it's like different than you think it might be. Are there tools that you continue to use in your other practice that you learned through this process? This is for either of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that through all of the projects that I've worked on, I'm always sort of learning and adding to the set of my understanding of like how people engage and participate with things. So it's and like one of the things that we thought of course, but maybe other people would do differently, was that we wanted everyone to be credited. And so
Right.
that was not only on the website, but in exhibitions. So when we would have an exhibition at the Seattle Art Museum or something, like everybody's name was listed, and we would tell them, you're in a show at the Seattle Art Museum or the Whitney or wherever it happened to be. And that was, I'd been thinking a lot about credit, but I hadn't quite wrapped my head around how you could be that inclusive about it and how important it was. That partly what that project, how it worked, was that people felt invested, and then they shared it with other people, and they, they cared about it, and it was partly about credit. So I think that was one of like many things that I learned through the process of working on that. But going back to what Miranda was saying too, I think that though we both probably had those kinds of reactions to our ideas, and we were always sort of like pitching ideas to each other about what a future assignment would be, but then we also would have good brainstorming sessions where we would like work through it either in person or on the phone or back and forth in email. And even though the projects ended and we haven't added any assignments for many years, we still get together and have brainstorming sessions and talk through each other's ideas. And I think
that's good.
as a result of having done that with 70 assignments, like
Right.
we've now got it so that we like understand each other pretty well and have pretty useful advice, I think.
Yeah. No, actually walking here, I was like, okay, I have two things. We can chat about whatever, but I have two ideas I want to run by you.
Nice.